Welcome, everybody. This is the fifth quarter. Hello, all of my NFL fans. NFL is back. Week one already begun. I know we're a little bit late out of the gates, but everybody has to make adjustments. But your favorite boys are here, Cal Lee and my man Mike D from out of Brooklyn. Mr. Mike D, what goes on, my brother?
What's going on? What's going on, Cal? Another season underway. Got to take week one off, though, because you don't know what you're going to get. You got to see what happens first.
I know. It's kind of a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the skeptics, a lot of the non-believers think that an NFL show has to start, from the moment that the Super Bowl ends all the way leading up to the new season. But, NFL fans, NFL purists, they know what really to expect. The only thing that's different is the draft and really the free agency. And once that goes away, it's all about, the 53 guys on each of these rosters for all 32 of these NFL teams that are going out there with one goal in mind, and that's to win a Super Bowl title. And, you don't need to take, all year around. But, I mean, listen, who doesn't love football? So, of course, it's going to be there. But for us, we just need week one to be done so we can start getting it in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the truth of the matter is we did our draft special. We had Shadrick on with us, and we broke down the draft and who we thought did well and who we thought didn't do well. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is it didn't mean anything because you still had 2 or 3 months before training camp, and then you had OTAs and training camp, and then after that you have injuries and a bunch of stuff like that. And then even after week one, when you have your starter set and you think you have everything under control, all of a sudden, boom, you can have a couple of injuries, a couple of key players go down, and the depth chart is all messed up, and we have a bunch of new things to talk about. So I'm glad we didn't jump right in. I'm glad we waited till week 2, because now we have some stuff to actually break down that means something, not preseason football and draft status and things like that.
Yeah, it does get a little drawn out, and, all of these sports moguls are out there, and this is what they predicate themselves off of. But, we love the game. We love the guys that are going out there on the football field, getting it hard every single week for 4 quarters. And so this is what we love to do, is to kind of give some more introspective. Week one was an exciting week because we saw a lot of upsets. And as we enter into week 2, all that's really been talked about and really all that's been, I guess you could say, dramatized to ad nauseum is the situation with Ray Rice. And, of course, we're going to give our perspective on that. We'll also talk about, shaky starts of teams that a lot of NFL critics, a lot of NFL analysts had positioned to be favorites. Does this bode well, going down the road now as we see these teams and what they've done in week 1, or does it mean nothing? So we'll get into a little bit of that. We'll also take a look at some key injuries that are, already are affecting teams. And then, obviously, my man Mike D, the fantasy guru, he's going to hit us up with our fantasy freaks and our fantasies faux pas in this week's edition of the fifth quarter. We appreciate everyone who's followed us from last season. My man Mike D and I have been very competitive when we've made our NFL picks. And, of course, we're going to do it again this year. So continue to follow us each and every single week as we continue to do the show. You know how to get up my man Mike D. Find my man Mike D on, what's your Twitter handle, my friend?
At CCD_blog. CCD_blog.
Right. And then you can also get at me at GameFace Lee. I also do my thing hosting The Baseline with my boy Warren Shaw, an NBA podcast, weekly discussions that talks about the hot button topics of the NBA. So, comes to all kinds of sports. You know how to get at me on my Twitter side. But if you want to do the right thing, the righteous thing, make sure you hashtag it with 5QTR. So if you got any questions or thoughts and comments, we know who you are and what you're about. Let's get right into it, my man Mike. Obviously the big talk around the whole world, forget just the sports community, the whole world is regarding the situation with Ray Rice, the NFL, and the whole spectrum regarding domestic violence. And I wanted to get your perspective from this too, because I really feel like this is hitting in all different kinds of angles. And while a lot of people are trying to, come with the Inquisition and start chopping heads off at the blocks. You know, you were the same person who would emphasize caution in how we lay blame, how we lay a culpability on people and individuals, and the perception of the circumstances by which we are saying that these people are at fault with. And I feel like this is what exactly this is coming to when we're talking about this situation with Ray Rice, the NFL, Roger Goodell, the scandal, and all of these parties that now have their hands in trying to get at, pick at, really not just bring down the NFL, but also bring down all parties that are involved in this situation, basically everyone but Ray Rice himself, who seems to be sliding under the radar. The only time his name is mentioned is because we keep bringing up the video that TMZ released.
But, you know, at the end of the day, he is going to be out of the league for at least a year. And at his age, closing in on 28, 27, 28, coming off down year already, he's not really somebody that's going to be on the radar for people to look into for a comeback next year to begin with. This was supposed to be his show and prove season. Maybe he had a couple of years left in the tank, you know what I mean? So while they might not be mentioning him, that's fine. But the truth of the matter is, I've only heard one particular sports journalist ask the question that I've been asking myself more than anybody. I listen to Michael Kay on ESPN Radio every day in the afternoon when I'm driving home from work, and Don LaGreca. And Michael Kay said, why did you need to see a video to know what happened? I mean, apparently Ray Rice had his meeting with Roger Goodell. They talked about it. Ray Rice told him what happened, right? And that's that. So Ozzie Newsome has come out, the general manager of the Ravens, and said Ray Rice was 100% truthful when he told them what happened in the elevator before they saw the tape. I assume he told the same story to Roger Goodell that he told the Ravens. So that means he told them, I hit her twice, I punched her with a left hook, she banged her head, knocked her unconscious, and then I dragged her out of the elevator. At some point, you have to ask yourself, well, what was the reason for them giving him 2 games if that was the explanation he gave, right? And then on top of that, you come out with the harder, stricter policy right afterwards, and you say, nah, 2 games was wrong, we messed up. So the first offense is going to be 6 games, and the second offense will be usually suspended indefinitely. And then a week later, the tape comes out, and you suspend the guy indefinitely. So basically, you just made up a policy and then broke it within 3 days. It kind of reminds me of the A-Rod situation, where Alex Rodriguez never technically tested positive for steroids before, yet he wasn't suspended for 50 games like a first-time steroid person is supposed to be suspended for. He was suspended for 162 games, and they tried to ban him for life. So I don't understand why they collectively bargain these agreements and these punishments if they're not enforceable and they're going to do what they want anyway. Now, I'm not saying that I agree that Ray Rice should have got 2 games, he should have got 6 games, or he should be indefinite. I can't really say which one is proper. But if you have a guideline for what the punishment is, and the dude told you what he did, and after the tape comes out you said, yep, that's what he said he did, then there really shouldn't be a debate as to what his punishment is, right? Why do we have so many questions?
Well, you bring up some excellent points. And in actuality, I think that question in itself offers one aspect as to how we should be perceiving this whole situation. But I'm looking at this even from the most basic level. And Alan Hahn, who I listen to a lot more often, you know, because now he's on ESPN Radio quite often now, and I'm glad, because he really does. He's a great radio
I like
personality.
Alan.
And he just brings up excellent topics, and the fact that he has a journalistic background also lends more credibility to it when he brings up how the media is playing an impact on how this is really transcended from just being an issue with a player committing a felony act to now this being a situation where we're calling for the head of the commissioner, which the only thing that I feel like as far as Roger Goodell is concerned is that if you're going to call for his head, you call for his head, because he really has been the most inconsistent when it comes to handing out punishments to the players and truly investigating its situations and being prepared for situations of this magnitude. If people recall, Roger Goodell had to sit in front of Congress when this whole situation regarding concussions occurred. And the way Roger Goodell sounded during that inquisition, where the representatives were lacing into him on why he couldn't answer questions as to why athletes were being suspended. With the NFL had no knowledge of these statistics and things of that nature. He sounds the same exact way with this situation regarding Ray Rice. So at best, what we're saying is Roger Goodell is really kind of like he's like the elephant in the room, so to speak. The biggest guy there, with no knowledge of anything except when the time comes that he has to hand down punishment.
Well, the funny part is that it's like they want to be the most successful sports industry in the world, right? The NFL wants to be the biggest and the best, which it is. It's probably worth the most money, merchandising and TV rights and everything else across the board. If you look at all the leagues, I think the NFL generates the most actual money per year, right? Yet, they don't want to be that big person when it's time to shine the light on them. Then they just want to cower in the background. You know what I mean? It don't work that way. You don't get to be the number one spot and then not have a light shined on you. It seems like when he has to answer any questions about anything negative to do with the NFL, he don't have any answers, and it's no comment. I'll get back to you. I'll let you know at another time. But when it's time for him to show that he's the big boss and I'm number one, I'm the commissioner of the number one sport, I'll tell you how many games you're going to be suspended for this, and this. And I'll tell you, Sean Payton, how you're going to be suspended for Bountygate. And I'll tell you, Bill Belichick, on what we're going to do about Spygate and this. And well, then he wants to be number one. Then he wants everybody to listen to him and obey him like he's the king, almighty leader of the biggest organization in sports, right? But when he's taken the task, it's like he becomes the commissioner of the NHL, where he's like the fourth or the fifth biggest. You know what I mean? And he don't know. Let's see what the big brother does or something like that. So I don't know. I'm not saying I think he should be fired. I'm just saying at some point you got to own it. If you're the president of the United States, you got to be the president of the United States 365 days a year, morning, noon, and night. You don't get to be regular. You don't get to act regular.
I completely agree with you on that point. Actually, the point that I was going to make is that I think people have to take a step back for a moment and understand who Roger Goodell is and what his role represents. Because if people want to apply proper pressure on Roger Goodell owning up to the mistakes that he's made to this point, not even just with the Ray Rice situation, but with just the way that he's handled his business amongst the players and the players' union, right? Then you need to basically advocate to the owners, because the owners employ Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is on the side of the owners, okay? If the owners are satisfied that Roger Goodell still makes some money, they are not going to remove him. So when organizations like the National Organization of Women come out and say, well, we want Roger Goodell's head and things of that nature, I would agree with you. However, I think that your empowerment is misplaced, because the pressure should be applied to the owners. The owners put Roger Goodell in this position, and they allowed Roger Goodell to set this precedent at the collective bargaining table for him to be judge, jury, and executioner with regard to how he handled the situation with Ray Rice. And now that you see that it's absolutely blown up in their faces, now is the time that if you're an organization, it's not about calling for the head of a guy who really is he's a foot soldier. Okay, it's like the president of the United States. We call on the president of the United States. We belittle the president of the United States. We make him out to be, is incompetent. He doesn't have a backbone. But guess what? He is actually, it's the reverse. There used to be a time when the president stood out more than anyone else. But he's actually under the duress of the Congress, the House of Representatives, because as long as they continue to keep fighting amongst each other, lobbying and positioning themselves, he is but a piece that's part of that bigger puzzle in politics. The same thing with the NFL. And so, like I said, I get where you're coming from with regards to Roger Goodell. I'm just saying that when people are applying that pressure, though, they have to be very careful about where they're applying that pressure. You know what I'm saying?
Well, here's the thing I don't understand, though, Cal. I think we both agree. Maybe we're expressing it in different ways. But where the hell is the NFL Players Association right now? Because
I completely agree with you.
What I'm trying to say is I'm not saying anybody should advocate for Ray Rice, but guess what? I'm a citizen. I'm a private person. I have my own views on domestic violence and whatever that may mean, right? But the NFL Players Association doesn't have views like that. The NFL Players Association, their whole job is to represent the players in that league, right? And they're supposed to defend the players in that league as they're supposed to be the bargaining power against the union, against the league itself as a union, right? Well, if there's an agreement in place that says Roger Goodell is allowed to suspend people for however many games he wants, that's number one. You agreed to that, no problem. He suspended him for 2 games. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you can't then suspend him for any more games for the exact same thing. You already made your decision, that's it. Right? When they suspend somebody for 4 games, they could appeal it, but they don't. If they win an appeal, they get the games reduced. They don't just call somebody in the middle of a 4-game suspension and said, you know what, you could play 2 weeks in. We were just kidding. They never do that, right? If somebody's suspended for 4 games, they suspended 4 games. So now you suspended a dude for 2 games, and then you reinstituted a new policy. From here going forward, this is going to be the new policy. And within 3 days, not only did you give him another penalty, but you overstepped the second precedent that you set. Why is the NFL Players Association not boycotting and saying you cannot do this to one of our members? Now, remember, the union's position doesn't have to be popular. The union's position doesn't have to be politically correct, and it definitely doesn't have to do with anything that the National Organization of Women has to stand for. They have one concern: defend the members of their union. And they're doing a piss-poor job of it. And they've been doing a piss-poor job of it ever since they negotiated this collective bargaining agreement, which gave Roger Goodell all this power in the first place. So in my opinion, their absence just in the last couple of days speaks volumes.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you from the perspective of the Players Association. Let me also add another point to this. And this is why I was saying why there are too many hands in the cookie jar. And we can talk about this. Really, we could have a whole show about this. And people have had shows about this and still have not really gotten to the heart of this situation. But I'm going to say this, and this is going to be really my only point with regards to the Ray Rice situation, and I'm going to try to see if I can fit it all in one bubble for a moment. This situation started out where it was about domestic violence, and this thing has now escalated where we are now nitpicking at aspects and parties involved and where their interests are and things of that nature, and we have gotten completely away from the point that when this all started, this has to start where the law represents. You know, a lot of everything that goes on with the NFL is predicated on investigations, and those investigations are started by what? The law. We have to abide by that law, that higher authority. We don't abide by the authority of the NFL. The players may, but even the players understand, the NFL understands that there is a law higher than theirs. Okay? The biggest issue that is, to me, and it continues to keep getting missed, and the excuse is, well, this is the precedent that's set in the state of New Jersey. And I live in New Jersey, which just absolutely makes no sense. That a first-time offender in a domestic violence situation gets probation. How does that make any kind of sense? You are physically harming somebody. And in this case, Janae Rice, who was then Janae Palmer, gets knocked out unconscious. You're physically harming someone, and you're telling me that they're getting probation? See, that to me is what starts the domino effect on how everyone's perception is completely jaded. And so now while everybody is going at the NFL, the Roger Goodell, they're going at the Ravens, hey, let's remember that when the authorities, the police, the district attorneys, the prosecutors had an opportunity to set a precedent, the National Organization of Women, and any other special interest, the NFL, everyone had an opportunity to apply pressure to the state of New Jersey to say, you need to do something about this because this doesn't make sense. And so now we're at this point, and everyone has gone all off on the deep end, but have completely forgotten that this all started that this thing happened way back on February the 15th or 17th when the actual event took place. And when the authorities had an opportunity to set precedent, they decided to go with the letter of their own ruling or their own law and just felt like, you know what, we'll leave it in the hands of how the NFL will deal with Ray Rice. However, this is a societal issue.
You know what? You want to hear something even crazier than that? Here's the crazy part. Ben Roethlisberger was accused of rape, right? And he was acquitted. He didn't even get convicted. And Roger Goodell suspended him. So Roger Goodell is shown precedent that he don't even care what the laws say and how the court case works out. If he thinks he should step in, he steps in. So while I agree with you that it's a tragedy in New Jersey the way things are handled for that thing, did it even really matter? Because if he really came in there and said, hey, I punched my wife in the face and knocked her unconscious, whether you saw a video or not, whether he got 10 years in jail or he got 10 seconds in jail, it don't matter. He had the ability to do what he wanted to. And he chose 2 games. Then he chose an indefinite suspension, which goes against his 6 games that he recommended anyway. I just don't understand how all of this can come out of this situation. And it's sad because at the end of the day, it does have to do with a woman being knocked unconscious. And people are forgetting about that. And you know what? I'm a little upset with her too, because here she is now. She's wants to sweep it all under the rug. And that's a typical reaction to a person who's been abused more than once. So I hope that's not the case, and I hope they do get everything right, because in my opinion, it's just not a good situation when you don't want to face the facts about something that is public knowledge for everybody.
I'm going to be the pessimist, man. I don't know if they're going to ever be able to get this right, because the things that have now been said, you can't take them back. The things that have been tweeted out, you can't take them back. While I applaud people who come out and they say the things that they say, it's not like domestic violence just suddenly arose when NFL players suddenly became, and the NFL suddenly became popular.
Well, domestic violence. Yeah, I'm sorry, Cal, I didn't mean to step on you, but where was now last in February when he punched it?
But that's what I'm saying. No, but that's what I'm saying. Like my whole point, my whole point is I applaud now speaking out, because they're saying we want something to be done about domestic violence. But quite honestly, the fact that Terry O'Neill came out and started lacing these statistics with regards to the NFL, to me, were absolutely irrelevant. This has been before Roger Goodell was even in office. This is a bigger situation. Where was now when they could have applied pressure to the state of New Jersey to change the ruling so that when Ray Rice did smack his then fiance, who is now his wife, that when the district attorney had the ability to bring the hammer down, it would be applied with the understanding that women wouldn't tolerate something like this and that any offense like this deserves jail time. Then you know what? It would have made it a much easier case for Roger Goodell to be Roger Goodell. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm not condoning what Roger Goodell is doing. All that I'm saying is that Roger Goodell is playing this on the premise that if the higher authority has set this precedent, then he has the excuse to underlie everything else that he's doing. He can either be the guy that goes over the top or under the top. And clearly, when it comes to domestic violence, he's played it under the top. So if you're an organization of this empowerment and you've been doing all of this stuff across the nation with regards to domestic violence, what is going after Roger Goodell going to do that you could have been doing over a year ago when this incident had happened prior to this point with other people involved, and more adjudication could have been applied when this happened? So when Ray Rice gets caught on camera, there's no question what we would have saw in part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and how many other parts you want to throw out there, he was going to serve jail time.
Yeah, and even last week when they came up with this new punishment, the 6-game and the indefinite suspension thing, since then two dudes already got arrested for domestic violence. So it proves to you that these guys don't learn their lesson, and it proves to you that if somebody's an abuser, they're an abuser, whether there's a rule against it or a law against it or not. So now you've got to punish them accordingly. But I didn't notice any National Organization of Women quotes last week when McDonald from the 49ers got arrested.
And let me say this.
Yeah.
We talked about National Organization of Women, and this is not to be like I applaud the National Organization of Women and everything that they have done. What I'm just saying is that the timing of them coming out and saying something to me is a little misguided. And I'm going to say this too: the Baltimore Ravens and their ineptness in this situation to me sets a bad precedent. It then lends to the idea that, once again, owners are just being owners, and it's about their business, it's about their money, protecting their own, protecting their brand. When a societal problem like domestic violence, that is not a situation where it's inflicted upon their players. It's the players inflicting it upon other people and amongst their own wives, their own kids. And you're not doing anything about it? Yeah, I don't need Major League Baseball to stand up to cancer the same way like I need the NFL to stand up to domestic violence. We all need to stand up to this. We don't need a major sports organization to have to set a precedent, but because they're always in the media eye, we have these expectations that they do. To me, this is why I feel like at times when we become outraged, when we start wanting to point fingers, we have to be careful about how we're perceiving to point those fingers, because at the end of the day, all you're asking for is to chop somebody's head off, and whoever you're getting to replace that situation, we're not guaranteed that that person is any better than the person before that. So we're not asking to provide solutions. We're just asking to, replace the battery. You know what I'm saying? It's a dead battery. We're just asking to replace it. And that's not what we should be doing when it comes to these societal problems. You're tuned to the Fifth Quarter. Cal Lee, Mike D, discussing the hot topics in the NFL. Obviously, no topic hotter than the situation with regards to Ray Rice. Blame him. Heads off with their heads to everyone that was involved in this situation, because it's taken away from our game, which is football. So with that being said, Mike, let's get to the matter at hand, which is football, my brother. All right, my man. Week 1, tragedy for teams that we all thought were just shoo-ins. Probably start out the gate with 5-0. All you people on FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever, sorry to disappoint you. All you people out there in Atlantic City, placing your bets, Vegas, sorry to disappoint you. If you had any aspirations about having 6-0 starts from teams like the Chicago Bears, teams like the Dallas Cowboys, which I would have laughed at you if that was even the case. But any of those aspirations of undefeat is already out the window. What do you think about right now, Mike, with regards to the shaky starts from a lot of these teams that were favored to really have successful seasons of what they've shown already in Week 1?
Well, what I think is hysterical is, me, I'm like an absolute sports junkie, right? So I just take it all in. I absorb everything the weeks leading up to the season. And all the people were teasing like they're going to make their picks, they're going to make their Super Bowl predictions, right? Super Bowl predictions. Season hasn't started yet, and all these shows, they make it Super Bowl predictions. And I kept hearing things like the Saints, the Broncos, the Patriots, the Packers. You know what I didn't hear? I didn't hear anybody take the Seahawks, right? After Week 1, the Seahawks are the only team I'm convinced all who we thought they were, to quote my man, all right? They are who we thought they were. They shellacked Green Bay and abused Aaron Rodgers and made him not throw the ball to one whole side of the field. That's amazing. They put up 36 points. They look great on offense, and their defense is stacked. Now, all these other teams that they were supposedly talking about, you either had teams lose or they almost lost, right? You got the Saints, they lose in overtime to the Falcons, right? You got the Eagles losing 17-0, 24-0 at home, getting shut out 24-0 by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they actually made a comeback and they ended up winning, right? Then you got a team like the Broncos. The Broncos were up 24-0 against the Colts, and they won by 1 touchdown. The Patriots lost in Miami. We talked about the Packers and the Bears. That was a disappointment, losing that game to Buffalo, right?
You don't want me to tell you how disappointing that loss was.
I'm just saying, I think it's funny that these supposed favorites all either looked like absolute trash and lost, or had a huge lead and almost choked it away. I mean, even the Broncos, if you watch that Bronco game, they were up 24-0 in halftime. And you're thinking right away, Peyton Manning's going to have another Week 1 like last year. Remember Week 1 last year? 7 touchdown passes, 56 points. Oh, baby. That's what I was thinking. 3 touchdowns to Julius Thomas in the first half? Oh, man, wait till the wide receivers get involved. Not only did they not score many points after that, but they almost gave it all back. So I'm shocked that people are so convinced that the Seahawks can't break that, oh, we won the Super Bowl, so we might not make the playoffs curse. The Seahawks are going to go like 14-2 this year, man. Make no mistake about it. Ain't nobody messing with the Seahawks.
Well, as long as the ruling with regards to illegal contact doesn't affect them, if there's consistency across the board, there's no question. I agree with you. I think the Seattle Seahawks are really, the NFL is a funny thing. The NFL seems to be like that one sports genre where coming out in the first week, we don't, you know how we talk about teams being rusty and they need to, figure out how to work with each other. We talk about that with basketball. We talk about that with baseball. Even if you have your preseason games, those first 5 games that you normally play in basketball, those first 5 games you normally play in baseball, your teams have to work out the kinks, get the chemistry right, and somehow, some way they'll all figure it out. In the NFL, you don't have that luxury. In the first week of the NFL, that's it. That's the tone setter right there. So all of your chemistry issues, all the the excuses that you have on why this isn't working and stuff like that, you have very little time and very little turnaround for you to figure those things out. Because once you lose one, you lose a second. You could already be 2 games behind in your own division, a division where you may not have an opportunity for a wild card spot. So there's very little room for error. So when I look at some of these teams that are favored, they're supposed to go deep in the playoffs, and I see how they perform in that week 1, I am going to be concerned because you're not going to be able to just instantly fix all of these problems. Usually the schedules and the way it's set up, who you're playing with, and what your division is like, if you're playing like in the NFC East, then maybe you do stand a chance to lose a few games here and there and still suddenly or miraculously still be in contention for your division. But in other situations that are knee-deep in talent, like the NFC West or maybe like the AFC West, you come out the gate sluggish, slow, or like the Kansas City Chiefs, or maybe like the Chicago Bears, and next thing you know, we could be talking about you not even being a wild card team, and we haven't even gotten past week 3 yet.
Bro, look at that. Look at the NFC North. Minnesota killed St. Louis. All right, and they did it on offense. So even though St. Louis is playing with a backup quarterback and all that stuff, the St. Louis defense was supposed to be all about that life, right? St. Louis defense was supposed to be so strong this year, right? Minnesota hung 34 on them. Okay? And then you got Detroit. They trounced the Giants. And Green Bay is going to be good. They're going to be okay. So even if you just looked at the performance this week, the Bears are in 4th place in that division. Because the Packers at least lost to the Seahawks. The Bears lost to the damn Bills. You know what I mean? So we gotta definitely step up our game if we're gonna do it. You know what I mean? For sure.
I definitely agree with you. And look, the favorites again. Seattle Seahawks is your favorites. I know a lot of people have picked the New Orleans Saints, and while the New Orleans Saints might look good offensively, they did not look good defensively. Definitely didn't look as good as the team they did last year. Matty Ice from the Atlanta Falcons, everybody felt like, we don't know what to expect from the Falcons. Last year was probably a one-year fluke. And they come out and they win a game that a lot of people didn't expect them to come out and win with an impressive team like the New Orleans Saints. So, it's already up in the air. And maybe, if nothing else, a lot of teams that we held in high regard are now coming back down to earth a little bit. And because of that now, we have to look at them a little bit more closely on a week-to-week basis than automatically tagging them, even against lesser talented teams. Because even if a team as bad as the St. Louis Rams, who still have a good defense, if this team at times cannot show a level of consistency, it's very easy that we could just basically say, you know what, this is another team that could be on the bubble. We don't have to say that about a team like the Seattle Seahawks, because what we saw from this team that we questioned about offensively, most definitely, they are answering those questions. They don't have to score 35 points, but the fact that they do makes them even that much more deadly. All right, Mike, let's keep things moving along as we further ourselves into the 5th quarter. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting and you brought up a very good question through the course of the week as we were, kind of planning out the show, is how effective now is the two-back system? Usually this comes from set formation and plays and situations, and a lot of it also was predicated from the fact that you want to preserve your elite running backs. So on third down, you bring that third down guy that could come out the backfield, maybe on a West Coast offense. And then it grew into a point where maybe it is good to have a guy like an Adrian Peterson and then have a backup guy that was similar to like Jamal Charles. I remember when the Carolina Panthers had two quality running backs. They had Stewart and then they had D'Angelo Williams. And and one of the things that we often expected was, man, this Carolina Panthers team is going to probably rush for, 200 yards a game easy. And we never really saw that come to fruition. So you brought up a very good question. Is the two-back running system truly effective in today's NFL?
Not only do I think it's effective, I think it's the majority. I think if you look at it, even teams that have what we like to call a featured back, like the guys that stick out like in fantasy the most, the guys that put up the most touches and stuff, like Philadelphia and Kansas City, even those teams are starting to use their guys more and more often. Now, we saw it with Arian Foster, with Ben Tate for years down in Houston, right? But LaShawn McCoy was like the leader in touches in the NFL last year, and they ran him to death. And what was their big offseason acquisition? Darren Sproles, right? And so people were like, all right, well, Sproles will go out, he'll catch passes, but he ain't going to do much. Guess what? Last week, week 1, Darren Sproles had the most rushing attempts he's had in 6 years. So they ran him as well as sent him in pass patterns. And that's with LaShawn McCoy, who's the #1 running back in the NFL right now. Okay? You got Michael Bush and Matt Forte up in Chicago. Jamal Charles and Niles Davis and Niall David in Kansas City. C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson. I mean, and then you brought up Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, right? Well, I saw a stat the other day that said that them two plus Cam Newton have rushed for 13,000 yards since 2008. That's the #1 in the NFL. So while they don't get it week by week at 200 yards, like you said, each of them having 100 yards each, right? It's not Oklahoma State with Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas in the same backfield, right? But at the same time, they are giving you what an old running back that was a quality guy would have gave you by himself. So if they could give you 150 combined yards, you killing it. And then God forbid one of them gets injured, like we saw what happened to Eddie Lacy the other day with his concussion, right?
Or your boy Arian Foster last season.
But we talk about Eddie Lacy is considered to be one of the top 5 backs in the NFL this year, leading into the year. And if they didn't have James Starks ready to go, what would they be doing right now? So every team is stacked up. And I think we talked about contracts on here plenty times last year. It's so cheap for the 49ers to keep a guy like Carlos Hyde on the roster. And then when he starts going, you're like, man, who? Frank Gore, who? Like, Carlos Hyde looked good last week. And it's cheap to have a young running back on the roster, you know what I mean? So I think you're going to see it more and more often.
Let me ask you this question, though, and because what I had said before is that while they have that combination of the two-back system, how effective has it truly been for the Carolina Panthers? The Carolina Panthers have not, even during that time frame, because, Jonathan Stewart is and D'Angelo Williams. D'Angelo Williams is no longer with the Carolina Panthers, right?
No, he is.
And Jonathan Stewart? I think Jonathan Stewart is.
Both of them. No, they just been hurt a lot, so they're both with the Panthers still.
Okay, so how many times has the Carolina Panthers been in the playoffs? So the thing that I'm curious about more so is that how effective is the two-back system through the course of an NFL season? Is it good within its framework of being a short-term, or is it good as a long-term effect? Like, do we still rest our laurels on the idea that this is still a quarterback league? You need a quality quarterback, or can a ground and pound type way? Because look at the New York Jets. while people are starting to rave a little bit about Geno Smith, we're still not saying with confidence Geno Smith is the answer for the New York Jets. But if you're going to have Chris Ivory and Chris Johnson, you know what I'm saying, the Chris and Chris show, come out and give you almost 200 yards of rushing and look like the days when you had LaDainian Tomlinson in that backfield for the Jets when they had those two opportunities playing in the Curtis Martin. You know what I'm saying? When you had that kind of that dual threat, doing that, then I wonder, can you get away with the two back system?
Well, but now what they're saying basically
is,
yeah, but what the Jets are saying is basically like they used to have to pay a guy like Curtis Martin big money to be Curtis Martin, right? And they depended on Curtis Martin. So if Curtis Martin got hurt, their season went down the tubes. Now what they're saying is we can break that money up amongst Chris Ivory and Chris Johnson, and if we could get that kind of production out of both of them, even if we lose a guy, we're only losing one of them. And then we can plug another backup in that role, and hopefully it's our system that works, and we can make it happen. So in my opinion, teams are gambling less at running back, and they're spending that money, like you said, on quarterbacks and wide receivers, which is fine and good. You know what I mean? I just think that it's too many teams to ignore. I mean, even teams that never did this before are doing this now. It's ridiculous.
I completely agree with you. You tuned to the fifth quarter. Mike D, Cal Lee, discussing NFL topics, the hot topics in the NFL. Be sure to get at myself, my man, Mikey D, on our Twitter handle. You know how to do, and hashtag up 5QTR. All right, man. It's that time of the show, bro, where this is your favorite segment, man. You love this. It's like giving you a big slice of marble cake. So we're gonna talk fantasy football with my man Mike D. Mike D, go ahead and first of all, let's kind of get right into the heart of it, because injuries are so prevalent out of week one that I really think that it is going to play a very big impact on guys who now have to make their adjustments leading into week two. So let's talk a little bit about these injuries that have plagued, the NFL in week one, and how they're going to have an impact for fantasy owners as they start leading themselves into week two.
Yeah, well, I mean, injuries right off the bat, you got big running back problems, right? You got Eddie Lacy with a concussion. He might play. We're still not sure. He's a game-time decision at this point. So that makes a big difference because James Starks is a guy who has a lot of value with Lacy sitting out, if that would be the case. But then you move to Cleveland. They had two big injuries for pretty much their only two relevant fantasy players. So Ben Tate and Jordan Cameron both got banged up in that game. It's looking like Ben Tate is going to miss at least 1 week. He's the NFL, they don't have to give you any information, but he had a little bit of a knee injury, and they might not want to rush him back. So he looks like he's definitely going to miss 1 week. So, there's a couple of running backs there. There's no definitive guy in Cleveland, so I would just stay away from that situation. But Jordan Cameron was having himself a hell of a first half last week for the Cleveland Browns, and then he hurt his shoulder, which has been an ongoing problem for him. So he's like a 50-50 shot that he might play this week. I don't know how that's going to play out, but a lot of people usually only have one tight end on their roster. And so if you are a Jordan Cameron owner, make sure you have a backup that you could put in there and you pick up in the next couple of days. But you don't want to just get stuck with whoever's left there on Sunday if they should happen to announce that Cameron is going to be out.
One question I wanted to ask you, Mike, and it's really one of those cautionary thoughts, because I think people, when they see an injury take place, whether it be from a defense that they've drafted or maybe a key player that they've gotten, and until they get like the assessment with regards to how long they're going to be out for, and this depends obviously of whether or not you're in a keeper league or you have something worked out where if you drop somebody, you have the ability to pick them back up. But how much emphasis do you place on a person who has an injured player with intent to drop them to go pick somebody that they think has some good upside or can give you some quality points through those weeks that injury of their star player is taking place?
Well, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, you have a bench for a reason, right? You have to back up the players that you have. All right. So you have to handcuff certain guys that you think if you have if your number one running back is Jamal Charles, one of your bench players should be Nile Davis, because if Jamal Charles gets hurt, Nile Davis is going to be the running back, right? And if you believed in Jamal Charles and believed in the system, then you should at least believe enough in whoever his backup should be to be comparable, not the same, but comparable. With that being said, you should have a balanced bench. I know guys that their bench is stacked with wide receivers and they don't have any running back depth. Well, when your running back gets hurt, what good is it? You know what I mean? So make sure you have a balanced system, including a backup quarterback. I don't want to have to go go pick up whoever's left on the scrap heap. Those are scrap heap players. So I want to have 2 solid quarterbacks on my roster for my bye week and everything like that. So as far as I'm concerned, I focus on that. Now, you want to talk about guys who get hurt or outstanding circumstances, I take that into consideration every week. I drop and pick up guys every week based on things like injuries or suspensions. So you look at Ray Rice. When they made the Ray Rice announcement and Bernard Pierce got benched last week for fumbling the ball, I said, who's the other running back on the Baltimore Ravens? Justin Forsett, right? So he looks like he's going to be the guy in Baltimore. So with that being said, I'm going to go grab Justin Forsett. Even if I never end up playing him or he ends up not being anything important for me, I'm keeping him out of somebody else's hands. And at the same time, he might pan out and actually be a star that nobody even thought about drafting 2 weeks ago when they were doing their drafts. You know what I mean? Circumstances changed. It went from Bernard Pierce and Ray Rice coming back in 2 games to Bernard Pierce getting benched and Ray Rice is out for the season. Justin Forsett all of a sudden looks really good. So you gotta base it on that. You definitely have to base it on that.
All right, my man Mike. Let's go ahead and talk about our fantasy freaks of the week and guys that you are definitely keeping your eye on moving forward into week 2.
The number 1 added player this week was from the U, represent baby, Allen Hurns, out of the U, undrafted wide receiver from Jacksonville. Anybody that knows me knows I've been talking about this kid for about 2 months. I drafted him on all 3 of my fantasy teams in the very last round. Nobody wanted to touch this kid. Everybody said if there was a guy on Jacksonville you're going to own, it's Cecil Shorts. Guess what? Cecil Shorts didn't even play in week 1. He was hurt, so he didn't even play. And then everybody said, well, if you don't have Cecil Shorts, you want to have Marquise Lee. Guess what? Allen Hurns had 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. Okay? So let's be real here. Marquise Lee is the big USC guy. Cecil Shorts is supposed to be an NFL receiver, and the undrafted free agent had 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. And if the Jacksonville Jaguars would have kept throwing the ball, they would have beat Philadelphia. They got lazy, and they tried to do that run out the clock offense, 3 and out, and Shady McCoy and those boys came back and got him. So Allen Hurns was the number 1 ad in fantasy leagues across the world this week, and it makes sense. And the other guy I said is Justin Forsett. I think he's going to have a big night. Tonight we're recording on Thursday. I think he's going to have a big night tonight against Pittsburgh, and I also think that he's going to be the man in a run-centric offense over in Baltimore. So those are the 2 guys I would definitely look to add if you wanted to pick up some freaks of the week this week, for sure.
All right, and what about our fantasy faux pas? Guys that obviously, either stay away from or are susceptible to stink up the joint.
I'm really worried about Doug Martin, man. I'm really worried about Doug Martin. That Doug Martin. Doug. Yeah, I mean, he was like a top 2 or 3 pick last year, and he got hurt. I don't blame. I never criticize a player for injury. Can't do nothing about that. But he was off most of the season last year, and he's supposed to be coming back this year. And he looked like absolute crap in that game, and he got banged up again. So I would stay away from Doug Martin for the time being. The truth of the matter is, I was real high on Maurice Jones-Drew coming into the year from the Raiders, but he looked like crap against the Jets. He had 9 rushes for 11 yards, and he ended up hurting his hand, and he's out for this week, for week 2. He's not even going to play. So I would stay away from him as well. But I will say one thing, Cal. I forgot to mention some stuff in the fantasy freaks. You need to go draft yourself a rookie wide receiver. because every year rookie wide receivers are the guys who win leagues. Last year it was Keenan Allen. This year it's my man Kelvin Benjamin over in Carolina. Him and Mike Evans in Tampa Bay are going to have monster years. You can mark it down right now. I said it in week 1. Kelvin Benjamin and Mike Evans are going to have monster years. If you could add one of those guys on your roster, I guarantee you in week 15 and week 16 when you're in the playoffs, you're going to be using them and thanking me. I promise.
All right, my man Mike D hitting us up with the fantasy football info. Make sure that you check this out. You can rewind it as many times as you need to. Get out your little stencil note paper. Write it all down because you're going to need it come this upcoming weekend. With that being said, Mike, let's go right into the games of the week, games that we're looking at that we think really important. Week 2, week 1 was done. I done boo-hooed and cried out all I need to cry out regarding my Bears losing. But let's go ahead and start talking about some important matchups that are going to be heading into week 2.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think it has to be the Bears 49ers. That's a huge game. I mean, the 49ers, people were starting to get down on them before the season started with all the injuries and all the suspended players that they were going to have and not having their linebacker, Navarro Bowman, and, you know, this, and this, and his cap a real deal. And they came out and looked pretty good in week 1. And now they getting the Bears team that lost the game that they probably shouldn't have to the Bills, and they could set them really far back in the NFC North. So if I was the 49ers, who's probably looking at playing for a wild card, because they're in the division with the Seahawks, I think I'd want to bury the Bears as much as I can, as fast as I can, and this could effectively do it.
I'm going to take the Cardinals versus the New York Giants. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at this New York Giants team, nobody's giving them a chance to really do anything in this division. As a matter of fact, analysts have been flip-flopping as to who they really think would be winning the division up until the very last minute now. Everyone's now saying across the board it should be the Philadelphia Eagles. And if I am the New York Giants, losing the way that I did to the Detroit Lions, number one, says a lot about the issues that, you know me, I've been harping about how I just do not like Perry Fuel as the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. And if you have one of the better secondaries in the NFL and you cannot find Calvin Johnson on that football field, I can only fear to imagine what will happen if the Cardinals and Carson Palmer, of all quarterbacks, finds Larry Fitzgerald. So if you're the Giants, you can't afford to go to an 0-2, and you definitely cannot afford at this particular juncture to look as bad as you did in week 1. Because in a market like New York, and a team that is heavily scrutinized, especially Eli Manning under the gun, everybody's calling for his head. They're saying he looks even worse than he did last year. You have got to figure out a way, if you're Tom Coughlin, to get this team to step it back up, beat this Arizona Cardinals team. They're a good team, but they're a beatable team. It's important for the Giants to step up and win this game. That's my sneaky important game of week 2.
I also think the Monday night game this week, what is it, the Eagles versus the Colts? I think that could be a really crazy game because think about this. The Colts are supposed to be a team that's like, you know, guaranteed to win their division, and they might start off 0-2. So that's interesting in itself. You know what I mean? That could be real messy for a team that's supposed to be a lock.
I completely agree with you. And one other game that I think people really should kind of take notice to is the Chiefs and the Broncos. Because it wasn't until week 8, I believe, when the Chiefs had played the Broncos. You know, the Chiefs went on that impressive run where they basically were toe-to-toe with the Denver Broncos. And, you know, ultimately that matchup is what we said is their litmus test to see how good the Chiefs really are. And, you know, after that game, you know, they had a horrible stretch the second half of the season. Well, they're playing the Broncos in week 2. And the Broncos are pretty much like the Denver Broncos. As a matter of fact, I think we give credit to the fact that their defense played a little bit better than we anticipated, given, you know, they were playing against an Indianapolis Colts team that has a healthy Reggie Wayne. And, you know, they've got T.J. Hilton, and they have some explosive weapons. So now you go into this situation, you look at this Denver Broncos team, they still got everything that we pretty much saw from last season, maybe even a little bit more. And then now you got a Kansas City Chiefs team that did not look impressive in their Week 1 loss. And so going into this matchup, I know with the San Diego Chargers team that's probably going to be looking for blood in the water, it's going to be important upon them to win key interdivision games like this one. I think this is an important matchup, more so for the Kansas City Chiefs, because they cannot afford to go 0-2 against the Denver Broncos team that may just run away with this division again.
I absolutely agree with you, my friend. A lot of teams could get buried right away.
Most definitely. You're tuned to the fifth quarter. Cal Lee, Mike D. So, Mike, are we going to run through our picks of the week? Is that what our intentions are? We just lace right through?
I do. I want to do it. I want to do it nice and quick, and then we'll take a tally at the end, for next week, and we'll get it all right. I just think we could go through. We don't even need to say much. Just tell them who you think you got in this game. It's early in the season, so we don't know enough to make educated, full-on explanations. We just got to go with the gut right now. So.
All right, so let's go ahead and start off with the Steelers versus the Ravens. I'm flying blind because I don't see what's on television. I'm telling you right now, yeah. I got the Pittsburgh Steelers in the upset over the Baltimore Ravens.
I don't know how it's an upset. I got the Steelers, too. They should win. The Ravens don't got nobody.
They got Joe Flacco.
I got the Steelers.
They got Joe Flacco. You got the Steelers, too. All right, Dolphins are playing at Buffalo. Buffalo still got a team. Buffalo has a stadium still. Didn't know that because they went into Chicago. I thought they owned Chicago. They had Soldier Field. I thought they played in Soldier Field because, Chicago wasn't there, so they must have taken Chicago's place. Who you got, Dolphins or the Bills?
I want to take the Dolphins, but the Bills, oh, man. I'm going to take the Dolphins. They looked good against the Pats last week.
I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills. I think that with everything going on with them and this whole, the new ownership and things of that nature, these guys want to play inspired football, and this could be that stretch where they look impressive for like 4 weeks, and then they become the Buffalo Bills again. So I think this is the week where they keep the Dolphins sleeping.
Okay.
All right. Lions taking on the Carolina Panthers.
I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers.
I'm going Panthers, too. I think they're an impressive team at home.
Yes.
Cowboys versus the Titans.
I abstain. No, I'm just take the Titans.
I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys in this one. As much as I think that the Titans are a good football team, Tony Romo can't have 2 bad games like he did in a row, Doug. So I think he figures out a way to bounce back. Plus, the Cowboys are an accident waiting to happen. Patriots versus Vikings.
Man, this is a tough game, huh? Who would have thought? I'm going to take the Patriots because they don't start off 0-2. But the Vikings did look good the other day, so I wouldn't be so shocked.
All right, I'm going to take I'm taking the Patriots on this one. Tom Brady does not like losing twice. Seattle Seahawks versus the San Diego Chargers at San Diego.
12th man, baby. Seahawks all the way.
12th man, Seahawks all the way. The 12th man's going to be in San Diego.
Pretty much.
All right, I'm gonna say that the San Diego Chargers need a 13th man in order to beat the Seattle Seahawks with that defense. So I'm going Seahawks. Kansas City versus Denver.
I'm gonna go with Denver because they're at home.
I'm going with Denver too. I think they're just a really strong football team at home, much like the Seattle Seahawks. Houston Texans, Oakland Raiders. The Raiders.
Houston all the way. Oakland might be the worst team in the NFL this year when it comes to final records. And I think Houston they played really good defense last week. So, yeah, man, I like Houston.
I'm a little skeptical because they don't have Jadeveon Clowney. So, will they double team J.J. Watt?
They didn't have him. They didn't have him most of last week either, though, so that's fine.
That's true. All right, well, I'm going to go with the Texans, too, just because you did. New Orleans Saints taking on the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, the Saints are going to murder the Browns. I feel so bad for him. Sean Payton is going to pull out some triple reverses. It's going to be ugly. Drew Brees might break a couple of college records. He might break some Kenny Trill 511-yard passing records this week or so.
They're going to break out Johnny Manziel last 4 minutes of the game because it'll be 45-2 New Orleans Saints. Atlanta Falcons taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a good one. We didn't really get a chance to talk about this one. It's a tough one to call, right?
tough game. But, you know, when it's not in the division, we tend to overlook these kind of games. But this is a tough out-of-division game. I'm going to take the Falcons because I think their offense is pretty strong. And we're going to see if they are about what they're about. I think they were a Super Bowl. They were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender last year, and they got derailed by injuries. Let's see if they can do what they have to do. I'll take the Falcons.
I want to jump on the Falcons bandwagon, but they're playing in Cincinnati, and while I don't care for Marvin Lewis still being the coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, they do play good at home. I'm taking the Bengals on this one, and really not because I don't think that the Falcons are capable of beating them. I just think that the Bengals might win because they're playing at home, and they play pretty good football, and their defense is still pretty solid. Jaguars versus the Redskins.
I like the Jaguars in this game, man. I think they're going to figure it out, that they're going to press, they're going to press, they're going to press. And it's sad because Jacksonville's got a really good defense, and they just got hung out to dry by their offense. They played too conservative in the second half last week. I'll take the Jags.
Until I see Blake Bortles out there on that football field, this team is going to always be a question mark to me. I'm going to take the Washington Redskins because RG3, man, he needs to figure out something. And if they can't do it against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I will never pick the Redskins for the rest of the season. Cardinals taking on the New York Football Giants at MetLife, my friend.
I'm taking the Cardinals. Their defense is too tough, and they look good the other night, and the Giants just are too confused right now. That they're not where I want them to be as a fan.
I'm going to take the New York Giants. I think that they will figure out a way offensively to put up enough points on the board, and defensively, I think, again, it's going to be more in the players than it is Perry Fuel. As long as they don't let Larry Fitzgerald run roughshod all over that secondary, I think that they'll be okay, and they will figure out a way to beat the Cardinals, although the Cardinals did look impressive against the Chargers. St. Louis Rams taking on the Tampa Bay Bucks.
I'll take the Bucks here, man. The Bucks didn't lay down last week. You know that Carolina was giving them a pretty good beating, and the Bucks came back. Glennon looked good in the second half. They got the two receivers, the big receivers. I'll take the Buccaneers, man. The Rams are banged up, and their defense is not what they said it was.
This is the part of the schedule. If you are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you take advantage of these teams that are not 100% and that are not all that great. So I like the Tampa Bay Bucks at home. Lovie Smith is going to have these guys ready to play. And in a division where they got to win every single game, seize every opportunity, this is one of those opportunities. So I'm with you. I think the Bucks take it at home. All right, the New York Jets, they head out to Lambeau Field to take on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Does Aaron throw to both sides of the football field this week?
I think Aaron's going to throw to any side he feels like this week on that Swiss cheese secondary. But the truth of the matter is, going into the week early on, I thought the Packers were the runaway favorite. The more I think about it, though, the Jets with that running attack, and it might be a close game. I'm going to go with the Packers at home.
I'm going to take the Packers as well, too, and I think it's going to come down to the gameplay of Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers executes the way that Aaron Rodgers has always been, perceived as being one of the best quarterbacks in the game, then there's no reason for them to not walk out with the win. Because even as great as that front four is for the New York Jets, you have a mobile quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. You got great receivers that know how to get open when he breaks containment. I think the Packers should take it. Finally, man, I'm sorry, we got two more left here. Chicago Bears taking on the San Francisco 49ers at the new Levi Stadium.
Yeah, I like the 49ers, unfortunately, Cal. I know you're a big Bears fan, and I wanted to see them do well, but it's not in the cards this week, man.
Did you hear the tone of my voice before we started this show about what I thought about that game? I said, San Francisco wins. Okay, so nothing's changed. San Francisco wins. Let's keep it moving. Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Indianapolis Colts, my friend. Monday Night Football game and the final pick for us to make.
I think the Colts right the ship, man. They're going to be at home. This is a game they have to win. If Andrew Luck is as elite as everybody says he is, and if the Colts are a real deal as everybody says they are, if they can play as good as they did in the second half against the Broncos last week, they should make a statement against Chip Kelly's Eagles. So I'll go with the Colts.
Man, I think this is going to be this is going to be an offensive slugfest. I think both Nick Foles and Andrew Luck are going to sling the football down the field, and I think it just comes down to which defense makes plays. Also, keep in mind, too, Robert Mathis is gone for the year. Now, I don't know how this is going to completely affect this team defensively, but a guy like Robert Mathis is going to be missed on that football field if you're the Indianapolis Colts, who's never had a great defense. They've just had a good defense. So if you have a good quality offense and an offensive innovator like Chip Kelly, you could expose that as long as your quarterback doesn't make mistakes. I think the Colts take it. but I wouldn't be surprised if the Philadelphia Eagles is slinging that ball all over the place, and the Colts at some point during that game wish they had Robert Mathis on that football field. So those are our picks for Week 2 and the start of the competition between you and me, Mike. Are you ready to go this season? You ready? You know, you started off pretty solid last year. You got hot out the gates, baby. Hot out the gates.
Yeah, but it took me out, though. I had a real cold spell when it got to be winter. And so I plan on saving myself for the stretch run this year. I'm gonna do it the right way.
Yeah, and hopefully we won't have as miserable a winter as we did, and then we have like 70 degrees when the Super Bowl happens.
True story.
I know. Whoever plays that game though, they're gonna have 70-degree weather because it's definitely not gonna be up in any northern stadium to be messing with. So they'll be good.
Yes,
Awesome show this week, my man Mike. Once again, man, I'm glad we're back on it, doing our thing, talking NFL, man, and of course we're gonna have another exciting week of NFL topics to discuss, and a lot more to look into as Week 2 will conclude, and we'll move ourselves right into Week 3. Any final thoughts, my brother?
Nah, man, I just can't wait to see how the next couple of days actually translate from this nonsense in the courtroom and the boardroom to the actual football field again, with games tonight and Sunday all day and then Monday night. I can't wait to see real football take over the headlines once again.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Obviously, our fans will appreciate you. More importantly, the fifth quarter appreciates you. For the fifth quarter, Cali, Mikey D, we appreciate you guys, and we will catch up with you next week, same time, same bat channel.